Welcome to the ClearlyWell podcast. I'm Elizabeth McKeon, a board-certified psychiatric mental health and addiction recovery nurse. This podcast aims to bridge the gap between mental health and substance use discussions, fostering understanding and empathy while reducing stigma. Join us as we amplify the voices of those with lived experiences, creating a non-judgmental space for their stories to be heard. Thank you for tuning in. Did you know that there is a myth that CBD sold at gas stations would be the same as from a licensed dispensary? That is just not true. The facts are that CBD products sold in gas stations are unregulated and may not contain what the label claims. They often actually have THC, which is the psychoactive component of marijuana, which could result in unintended psychoactive effects and also a positive drug test. For my folks out there who are in recovery, please know that if you do use that, you can end up testing positive, especially for those of you who might be in drug court. So hey guys, this is Elizabeth McKeon with the ClearlyWell podcast. Today, I just kind of wanted to say, I'm sorry I've taken a little hiatus, and I've decided to start doing what I call a short sesh, where I am able to sort of give some feedback and information not only on our guests' questions in the email, but be able to give some answers to those questions, but also maybe just give some facts within the industry that I work in. I also just want to give a quick little shout out to the Talkin' Trash podcast and Tim Schneider and his folks there on that podcast. Man, they have pumped me up at least 3 times that I know of on their podcast, and they have invited me to be on there. So now I'm going to give them a shout out. They do a couple of really cool things on their podcast. You can catch them. They actually do live podcasts, which I think are really cool. You know, they come on and you can see their guests there. And they're a recovery podcast as well. But these folks are actually those with lived experience themselves, interviewing people in the industry. They have guests on there that are experts in the industry. They've invited me to be on there, as I already stated. But they also do one thing that I think is really cool, and it's called Clean Time. And that Clean Time segment is where they're actually giving credit to folks who are even as short as like hours in recovery or 1 day in recovery. And they're giving that credit to those folks. They show their picture. They give them like a little badge. Anyway, it's just the coolest thing I've ever seen. And if you want to check them out, they definitely are on YouTube at the Talking Trash podcast. They have a lot of really cool music and art on there. And I will definitely be a guest on there really soon. So that's just the first thing I wanted to say. The next thing I wanted to say is just give a little bit of background about myself. I think it's important to say, as I do in the intro, that I am a board-certified addiction and recovery nurse, as well as board-certified in psychiatric mental health. I take what I do very seriously, but I don't know everything about the industry, so I make mistakes. And, you know, I know that recently I said something on a podcast about xylazine and that Narcan does not work with that drug. If you walk up on someone who maybe has overdosed from fentanyl and it was laced with xylazine, that Narcan won't work. I do want to correct that. I recently attended a conference, the Georgia Addiction Medicine Conference in Savannah, and I heard some experts, some physicians speaking about this. There's some new information coming out about that. It's important to know to keep using Narcan or naloxone on that client that you would walk up on, or that patient or that individual. Keep giving them that. Use breaths in your CPR, lots and lots of breathing. And also, if you have access to an IV fluid or oxygen, all the things, all the life-saving things into addition of the naloxone to help revive that person. So there is some success out there, and I just want to correct myself there. Another thing that I wanted, I had a question come in to my email, my ClearlyWell email. And Sean, can you hand me let me read what my email is actually to my guests, so that if you want to email me at the ClearlyWell podcast, my email is actually clearlywellpodcast@gmail.com. So I didn't put the on the front of it. It's just clearlywellpodcast@gmail.com. So I just did want to answer some questions coming from some folks that listen to the podcast. And one of them was, what is an RCO? And an RCO is something we talk about. That is a recovery community organization. And what that does is that provides a place, an entity for those who are in recovery, or even if you're not in recovery and you actually use substances, to have a safe place to go, to turn in your needles, to have a place to apply for a job, to get food, water, Narcan, have a person to talk to. And it's just a safe space. It's a really cool thing. There's probably... they're not in everyone's community, because you really have to almost have like grant funding in order to have an RCO. And I know currently my organization, Healthy Georgia, is currently trying to open up the Pathways RCO through Unite Rabin, and it's very, very in its infancy. And it's just not as easy as it sounds. You want these folks with lived experience to be able to open these places and have a safe place for people to come. And I wish all the funding in the world was available for people to do that, but it's hard. You have to apply for grants. You have to ask for philanthropists to donate. Currently, that's what we're trying to do. So thank you for the person who reached out asking about what that was. And I always try to say, hey, it's a recovery community organization, but I guess that really doesn't give all the details of that. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was a question about gas station drugs and what really is kratom. We touched on that in the EMS with Brett and Liz. We talked about some of those, and we actually ended up deleting that because it is such a big topic that it wasn't something that we could just lightly speak on. So I do want to talk about what is kratom. The myth about kratom is that it would be a naturally and completely safe remedy for pain and anxiety. That is a myth. Facts. While kratom is derived from a plant and has traditional uses, it can be very addictive. It has side effects such as nausea, hallucinations, and also you would go through a similar withdrawal, just as though you would with a typical opioid. And the next thing I want to talk about is another gas station drug, which they're actually referring to in the news as gas station heroin, and that's called tianeptine. Tianeptine. It's spelled Tianeptine. That is being branded under many names in the United States, and it actually also is a mood enhancer. They're trying to sell it like it's good for you, right? It definitely will give addictive potential and opiate-like effects. Some of the ways that's being marketed, one of the most widely recognized products on the market that's being sold for focus, mood, and energy inside of gas stations and retail shops is called Zaza Red, Z-A-Z-A Red. The next one is called Tiana, Tianna, red, white, or green. That is also being sold as stress relief, relaxation, mood improvement. This is just very, very disturbing. The next one is called Vicane, Vicaine, also being sold as pain relief and energy booster. This is really being touted as an alternative to opioids. So those folks who are trying to get relief from their opioid withdrawal are turning to these gas stations. So, I mean, this is just very, very scary. I just want to say they usually will say you have to be 21 to buy these gas station drugs, but I mean, and there's so many more of them. I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard of the bath salts and all of that, but I think we're getting into something that is even more scary. So just for some final thoughts, guys, emerging street drugs and gas station drugs are very poorly regulated, unpredictable, and dangerous. Their effects can range from mild intoxication to a full-blown health crisis and even death. So please educate your children. For those of you who are in recovery, be aware that these are drugs and they're unregulated and can very much harm you. So this wraps up today's short sesh. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to start doing these on a regular basis, starting off with Did You Know? And also, don't forget the Talking Trash podcast. Those guys are great with Tim Snyder. Have a great day, guys. Bye. I want to state that please do not substitute this podcast for professional therapy or treatment. The content shared here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We do ask our listeners to respect the diverse experiences of individuals and refrain from passing judgment. If you or someone you know needs professional help, please seek the guidance of a registered and qualified mental health professional. ClearlyWell is brought to you by Healthy Georgia and produced by CNC Media.